Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen a number of important articles. Today we had 13 important articles and they all deserve a comprehensive and detailed analysis. The whole idea is to ensure that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking this initiative, do support us with your likes and comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now, before we start the discussion, I have a couple of important announcements. For 2026 and 2027 aspirants, Unacademy is giving a great opportunity for you to enroll for our 15 and 18-month subscription plan. You stand to win a flat 60% off on our IAS courses that will give you access to all the live lectures by our top educators, along with the study material, the test series, and the doubt resolution sessions and mentorship sessions. You can avail this offer. The offer ends today, and all you have to do is enter the code IAS English. Click on the subscription link provided in the video description box below and enter the code IAS English to avail the flat 60% off. So you can enroll for the program at just 23,499 for a 15-month subscription and 24,999 for a 18-month subscription. The other important announcement is not for IAS aspirants but for JEE, IIT, NEET aspirants. So if you know any of these aspirants, do let them know about this mega event that Unacademy is organizing on the 1st of March. Unacademy Aarambh would be an online event that goes live at 7 p.m. on 1st March on the JEE Nexus YouTube channel by Unacademy. So do let them know to attend the session live as they get to meet their top educators, influencers and celebrities as well. Now before we start, do ensure you join my Telegram channel by scanning the QR code, because after the session ends, I'll be sharing the PDF of the session on my Telegram channel. With this, let's get started with the analysis of today's newspaper by first looking at this important editorial from page number 8. This article is focused on the delimitation controversy which has broken out. In fact, we did have a small discussion on this topic yesterday as well. But since there is a detailed editorial on this topic and some important developments are going to take place in the next few days, I think it's very important to go a little deeper into the topic of delimitation and understand what is this controversy all about. Recently, the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, M.K. Stalin, has raised this question regarding the upcoming delimitation exercise. Just yesterday, the Chief Minister of Karnataka, Siddaramaiah, as well, has brought up the same issue. South Indian states particularly feel that the upcoming delimitation exercise could be a disadvantage to the South Indian states as far as their representation in the parliament is concerned. And in fact, M.K. Stalin has even called for an all-party meeting on the 5th of March to discuss how South Indian states, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh and Telangana in particular, how would they be affected by the upcoming delimitation exercise? What is the main friction point they have with the center? What are their demands? What are their concerns? Let's understand this. But I'm sure there would be a number of beginners as well watching the video who may not understand what is delimitation. So as we promised, this would be a comprehensive session covering even the basics, the concepts, and then we'll discuss these details and provide the analysis that is needed for the exam. So those who already know the topic, just bear with me for a few minutes because we need to keep in mind the beginners and freshers as well. First, I'll introduce you to the concept of delimitation. We'll understand a few basic facts about delimitation and then we'll get into the analysis of this topic. Delimitation is a constitutionally mandated process for fixing the number of parliamentary seats in the Lok Sabha and also to draw the boundaries and set the territorial limits of the electoral constituencies for Lok Sabha elections and as well as for state legislative assembly elections. This is what you mean by the delimitation exercise. It is an exercise to determine the number of seats in the Lok Sabha and the legislative assemblies and to draw the boundaries, the territorial boundaries of electoral constituencies for Lok Sabha elections and state assembly elections. Under Article 82 and Article 170 of the Indian Constitution, it has been provided that to determine the number of seats in the Parliament and the Legislative Assembly respectively and to determine their territorial extent, Parliament will set up a delimitation commission. Through an act of the Parliament, a delimitation commission is set up for this purpose. This commission will also determine the reserved seats for SC and ST community. The reserved seats for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes would also be determined by the delimitation commission. So for this exercise, census data is very important because the whole idea of delimitation is to ensure equitable representation. Ensuring equitable representation is the primary purpose of a delimitation exercise, because the idea is to ensure that each constituency should roughly have the same population. So the representatives in the Legislative Assembly, in the Parliament, in the Lok Sabha, they will roughly represent the same population, the same number of population or the same size of the population. So through the delimitation exercise, we can ensure equitable representation in our parliamentary system, where each representative who is elected from that constituency roughly represents the same size of the population. So that is why census data is very important. The census data, which gives us population figures, is very important for the delimitation commission that is established. The delimitation commission relies upon the census data to determine the territorial extent, the boundaries of electoral constituencies, and to decide upon the number of seats for legislative assemblies and in the Lok Sabha. So in the past, 3 such exercises have been conducted where the number of seats have been fixed in the Lok Sabha and in the state legislative assemblies, and the territorial boundaries have been altered. These exercises were conducted on the basis of census data from 1951, 1961 and 1971. Because generally in India, census has been a decennial exercise conducted once in a decade, and this has been a practice since colonial times. So after the census of 1951, 61 and 71, delimitation commissions were set up by the Parliament through an act of the Parliament, which carried out the delimitation exercise. Not only the seats were adjusted, the number of seats were altered according to the size of the population, but even the boundaries, the territorial limits were also fixed for electoral constituencies during these 3 delimitation exercises. But following this, through the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act brought out during the emergency period under the Indira Gandhi government, the delimitation exercise was frozen as per the census data of 1971 in order to allow the states to focus on family planning to stabilize our population. So for subsequent delimitation exercises, 1971 census data would be the reference point, and this restriction would apply until the 2001 census essentially. So after 2001, delimitation was carried out, but there was no change in the number of seats because there was a freeze on the reference data, the census data, which is the 1971 census data, but only the territorial boundaries of constituencies were altered post 2001 through another delimitation commission. Then through the 84th Amendment Act, this restriction on delimitation has been extended till 2026 to provide for population stabilization and family planning programs, and to ensure that states with higher population are not incentivized, and states which have actually done well with regard to family planning and population stabilization are not penalized. This restriction was placed first through the 42nd Amendment Act, where delimitation was frozen till the 2001 census. So the data would essentially be the 1971 census data. Post 2001, territorial boundaries were slightly altered, but number of seats in Parliament and legislative assemblies were not changed. It was not touched. 84th Constitutional Amendment Act has extended this restriction until 2026. Now, what does this mean? See, generally, in the normal course of events, in 2021, we should have had a census, and post 2026, if let's say 84th Constitutional Amendment Act has placed this deadline, there is a threshold placed as 2026 before which delimitation should not be done, number of seats should not be changed, then it means that the next possible delimitation would be based on 2031 census. Only after 2031 census was conducted, maybe few years later, by 2033, 2034 is when the next delimitation ideally should have happened. But now there is a change. The Modi government has not conducted the 2021 census. There has been a long delay in the census which should have been conducted in 2021. First, the government said the difficulties created by COVID-19, the pandemic, has prevented the administration from carrying out the census exercise. But many years after the pandemic, the government has not shown any interest to kickstart the census exercise. This has raised a suspicion. It has even led to allegations that the Modi government is deliberately delaying the 2021 census, trying to push it beyond 2026. Because imagine, if the next census were to happen in 2026, then this census data could possibly become a reference point for the next delimitation, which can be conducted after 2026 according to the 84th Amendment Act. Now, if current population numbers are taken, then states with higher population, which have significantly added population in the last 50 years, they will stand to benefit with more seats, exponentially higher number of seats being awarded to them in the parliament. Whereas those states which have actually stabilized their population through better welfare programs, through better family planning measures, and through better economic development, they will stand to lose the representation in the parliament. So this breaks open the divide, the socio-economic and cultural divide between the North Indian states and the South Indian states. Because traditionally, South Indian states and also states in western part of India, Maharashtra, Gujarat, etc., they have performed well economically. They are the most developed states in India, most industrialized states in India. These state governments have managed to achieve population stabilization. In fact, in some of the states, the fertility rate has already fallen below the TFR of 2.1, which is the fertility rate needed for population stabilization, which means some South Indian states are on the path towards a decline in population in the coming decades. So if population is the basis for deciding the number of seats that each state gets in the parliament, then states with lower population, states which have reduced their population, stabilized the population, they will be at a disadvantage because they will get lesser seats in the parliament. So this could threaten federalism itself. This could threaten federalism as the interests of several states could get compromised. But other states which have significantly increased their population, as they have not really promoted family planning programs, not focused on population stabilization, some of these states will benefit unfairly, leading to a significant jump in their parliamentary representation. And this could change the political clout in the country. The political clout enjoyed by different states could change significantly and alter the balance of power between the states. Now, this will obviously reflect in the financial allocations which are provided later as well, through the devolution of funds, through welfare programs and other financial assistance the center provides to states, will largely depend on the number of seats that a state is providing to the ruling party in the parliament. So this is where South Indian states have a legitimate, valid concern that any attempt to conduct the next delimitation exercise based on 2026 census data will adversely affect the South Indian states. And if there is no guarantee, no promises given to protect the interests and the principle of federalism, then this could compromise the genuine concerns, the genuine interests of the South Indian states. So that is where the controversy erupts. Now, just to put things in perspective, look at the numbers here. See, until now, if you take the first three delimitation exercises, After the third delimitation exercise based on 1971 census data, each constituency was designed in such a way that each MP in the Lok Sabha would represent roughly 1 million population. Approximately each member of parliament in the Lok Sabha would represent 1 million population. On this basis, now we have around 500 odd parliamentary seats, 543 parliamentary seats. But you already see a divide. For example, a state like UP had been recommended 85 seats based on 1971 population data. Eventually, it has been awarded with 80 parliamentary seats. We know how UP plays a pivotal role in the formation of the central government. When Lok Sabha elections are held, if a party has to capture power, its focus will be on UP as it has 80 seats, the maximum number of seats, thus making UP very important as far as national politics is concerned. So the parties which come to power, the governments which get formed based on the seats they have won in Uttar Pradesh, will obviously favor UP when it comes to government schemes, financial allocation, devolution of funds, which could adversely affect the other states with lesser seats in the parliament as they become insignificant. Now, based on 1971 census data, roughly these were the seats allotted to different states. You can see the difference here. Tamil Nadu, Kerala getting 39-20 seats, whereas undivided Bihar, which included Jharkhand as well, got around 54 seats, with UP finally getting around 80 seats. This, in a way, maintains an element of balance of power while ensuring that delimitation is representative, and it, in a way, respects the spirit of federalism and maintains the balance of power between the states. Now, let's see what will happen if 1971 census data is not used. If a new census is conducted, let's say this year or next year, and that becomes the basis for a new delimitation exercise before 2031, then let's see how the numbers can look. These are the projections offered by many experts. See, in the last 50 years, India's population has grown substantially, and especially few states have grown quite exponentially, whereas others have stabilized their population. So this population divide will have a direct impact on the parliamentary seats that are allotted to these states. According to projections, UP might get up to 250 seats to around 120 seats. This is the range which is predicted from the current 80 seats which is provided to Uttar Pradesh. Based on the current projected population numbers, UP might get anywhere between 120 to 250 seats depending on how the population ratio is demarcated for different constituencies. Let's say the Delimitation Commission goes with the same ratio as last time, then UP will stand to get easily around 250 seats, at least about 230 seats, making Uttar Pradesh absolutely pivotal in national politics. Let's say this is unrealistic, because if you look at this ratio that was used in 1971, then eventually we will have around 1397 to 1400 parliamentary seats in Lok Sabha, which is almost impossible and impractical to accommodate, because even the new parliament has been designed by keeping in mind maybe 900 MPs may have to be accommodated. So 1300, 1400 is impractical, it's maybe out of the picture. Okay, let's rule out this possibility. Let's say a different ratio is adopted where each constituency roughly will represent a 1.5 million and a 2 million population. Because right now the ratio is one constituency roughly corresponds to 1 million population, approximately. Let's say the ratio is altered to 1.5 million and 2 million respectively. Look at how the seat allocation changes for different states. Uttar Pradesh, Bihar will stand to gain significantly, almost more than doubling their existing number of seats, whereas others might see even a decline, or only a few seats might be added for South Indian states and even Western states, whereas the North Indian states might benefit disproportionately. Now, this is where the concern comes up. See, political parties, of course, be it a regional party like DMK or a national party like the BJP, eventually they are all interested in winning votes and in forming governments. Now, the point of the smaller parties is that since the North Indian belt, the Hindi heartland, the so-called Hindi heartland, UP, Bihar especially, as it represents the stronghold of the BJP, it could unfairly benefit the BJP, thus helping BJP win more seats and perpetually form central government again and again after elections and elections, which might create an unfair playing field for other parties as well. Upon this, the idea of one nation, one election could further swing the balance in favor of the BJP. The other argument presented by state governments is that this could affect their welfare eventually. This could affect their rights, their interests, because their voice will not be heard in the parliament. If their number of seats goes down and other seats see a doubling and tripling of their seats, obviously they will have a greater voice and the balance of power will shift in favor of them, whereas the other states will get affected. So this is the whole controversy. Right now, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has promised that some kind of status quo will be maintained on a pro rata basis. Now, what does this pro rata basis mean? We don't know. Union Home Minister Amit Shah also has reiterated the statement of Prime Minister Modi that South Indian states will not be harmed. South Indian states will not lose a single seat. They will not lose even one seat. But please understand, not losing a seat is not a guarantee of equitable treatment. Because what if seats for UP, Bihar and other states jump up and South Indian states just get to retain the number of seats they have? That is still a shift in balance of power. So pro rata basis, does it mean that 1971 census data would still be used for the next delimitation exercise? Is that what the Prime Minister means? Or does it mean that the population stabilization efforts will be taken into account and South Indian states and the western states of India will not be punished for stabilizing their population? So this clarity has not been provided by the government. That is the reason behind this entire controversy. And DMK has now called for an all-party meeting on the 5th of March. So it's still a developing story. Let's continue to track this development. But I hope you've got the entire gist of this controversy. So you can not only expect some prelims questions based on the basic concepts we have learned, you can expect a detailed mains question as well. So take up this practice question and write a good answer based on what we have discussed. Post your answers in the comment section so it can help other students as well. Delimitation must remain true to both representation and federalism. See, when it comes to delimitation with the current population numbers, there are two conflicting objectives which comes up. One is maintaining the spirit of federalism, maintaining the overall balance of power amongst the states to ensure no state is unfairly treated. Right? That's what we have been discussing till now, which is the demand of the South Indian states. But don't you think there is a need for equitable representation? States like UP, Bihar, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, they've all seen a significant jump in their population in the last 50 years. So obviously, shouldn't representation in these states be equitable? Shouldn't there be more MPs in these states representing a certain population, let's say 1 million population, 1.5, 2 million, whatever is the ratio decided? Don't you think there should be more MPs so that the needs of the constituency can be addressed, the needs of the electorate can be addressed? So there is a valid demand from the North Indian states as well for increasing representation because their population has gone up. So to ensure fairness, to focus on welfare and development, to address the grassroots problems, these states which have more population, they do require higher representation. But this demand for equitable and higher representation comes into conflict with the spirit of federalism and the question of balance of power between the states or amongst the states. Now, how will the center balance this? How will the Delimitation Commission, which is going to be set up in some time, how will it balance these conflicting objectives? That is the question asked over here. So let's see how many of you can write an answer to this question. Please post your answers in the comment section. Let's look at another important column focusing on India-US defense relationship. The focus of this article, written by Harsh V. Pant, a well-known strategic expert working with popular think tanks such as the ORF. He brings out his detailed insight on India-US relations and helps us understand the defense ties between India-US. What were the key takeaways following Prime Minister Modi's visit to United States, where he met with Donald Trump and some key initiatives were announced, important agreements were signed. So based on these new developments, the writers are evaluating the status of India-US defense relations. See, in the last 2 decades, since 2001, India-US have been very close defense and strategic partners, particularly after the 9/11 attacks. The US made a shift in its geopolitics as it launched a global war on terrorism. It realized it couldn't rely on partners like Pakistan, and it needed reliable partners like India for intelligence sharing and counter-terrorism efforts. So this is how the India-US strategic partnership began, with close security and defense relations. Then as US saw India as a counterweight and a counterbalance to China, it relied more on India for stepping up its presence and influence in the Indo-Pacific so that it could counter the rising influence and aggression of China. And the US has been supplying key weapons and military platforms to India to help modernize India's armed forces, so India can stand up to Chinese aggression and help in stabilizing the Indo-Pacific region. So in the last 2 decades, India has procured many advanced American military platforms. For example, the C-17 Globemaster and C-130J Super Hercules transport aircraft, which has added heft to the Indian Air Force and its airlift and transport capabilities. The C-130J has tremendous tactical capabilities, a very small transport plane which can land and take off in short runways, unprepared runways, which can be used for tactical operations such as special forces operations, covert operations behind enemy lines. It can also be used during disasters to drop disaster relief equipment or deploy troops and military equipment. The C-17, which is often referred to as the flying elephant, is a massive transport plane which also has tremendous capabilities. It can also land and take off in very short unprepared runways, giving tremendous strategic airlift capability. It can deploy hundreds of troops with heavy military equipment as well. It's so massive in size, it can even fit helicopters, artillery guns and combat vehicles inside the belly of the plane. It can be very useful in disaster management operations or evacuation missions, where you can easily transport hundreds of people. We have procured the P-8 Poseidon, the P-8I Poseidon, which has enhanced the maritime surveillance capabilities of Indian Navy, and it's also known as a submarine hunter or a submarine killer because of its anti-submarine warfare capabilities. So India has procured the P-8 Poseidon not only to enhance our maritime domain awareness in the Indo-Pacific, but primarily to spot Chinese submarines and, if required, hunt them down in the possibility of a conflict. We have procured the MH-60 Romeo helicopters, which has a similar capability. The MH-60 Romeo has similar maritime surveillance and anti-submarine warfare capabilities. We have procured advanced helicopters like the Apache ground attack helicopters, the Chinook transport helicopters, which has been inducted into Indian Army and as well as the Indian Air Force. Then we have been procuring armed drones, the MQ-9B, the Sea Guardian, Sky Guardian drones, which is the latest variant of the erstwhile Reaper and Predator drones, have been procured, which steps up not only our surveillance and intelligence gathering capability, but also enhances our remote strike capabilities, unmanned remote strike capabilities. So India-US have built a formidable defense relationship. In fact, the US has even awarded India with the MDP status as a major defense partner. India is recognized as a major defense partner by the US, which allows US to sell advanced weapons and military technology to India. India has also signed, we have signed all the 4 basic agreements, the 4 foundational agreements that are needed with the US to access latest American technology, be it the COMCASA agreement, the General Military Information Exchange Agreement, or the Geospatial Information Exchange Agreement. The 4 foundational agreements have been signed by India, which is a requirement of the US to be able to sell advanced military technology to its close allies. Usually, this is done only by its NATO allies and close allies. Only they have been given the MDP status by the US, only they have signed the 4 foundational agreements. So India falls into the same bracket, giving us access to the latest American military technology. Now let's see What announcements were made during Prime Minister Modi's visit to US a few days ago? What new initiatives have been launched? And what is the trajectory of India-US defense relationship? See, there were many positive takeaways as well during this visit. For example, India-US have finalized a deal to procure the Javelin anti-tank guided missiles for the Indian Army, along with the Striker infantry combat vehicles, which is going to add heft to the Indian Army. India will be procuring the Javelin anti-tank guided missiles and the Striker infantry combat vehicles, and this involves co-production. We are not simply buying these platforms, but there will be transfer of technology to India to domestically produce these weapon platforms in India, which is a big boost for defense indigenization and Make in India initiative. It will strengthen our domestic defense ecosystem. Clear? We have signed a fresh contract to buy 6 more P-8I Poseidons to enhance our maritime domain awareness and submarine fighting capabilities. Indian Navy already operates an entire fleet of P-8I Poseidons. Now we have signed a new deal for 6 new additional P-8I Poseidons. Apart from this, India-US have launched new initiatives. What are these new initiatives? The Asia Initiative, Autonomous Systems Industry Alliance. This will bring our research institutions, private companies, defense startups together to focus on autonomous systems such as unmanned aerial vehicles or underwater remote systems and vessels. Such unmanned platforms will be jointly designed and developed through the Asia Alliance, the Autonomous Systems Industry Alliance. India-US have even set up the Compact Initiative to promote research collaboration in the defense domain, and they have replaced the ICET initiative with the Trust Initiative. See, in 2023, when PM Modi visited US and met with then President Biden, India-US had launched a new partnership called ICET, which was proposed in 2022. It stood for Initiative for Critical and Emerging Technologies. So under ICET initiative, the national security councils of both the countries, through their NSAs, they would collaborate with each other to focus on collaboration in critical emerging technologies, such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, space research, semiconductors, advanced and new forms of communication, etc. Now, this ICET initiative has now been replaced with the Trust Initiative, and it has been further expanded. The Trust Initiative will not only focus on critical emerging technologies like AI, quantum computing, etc. It will also focus on supply chains and critical minerals. It will bring India-US together, not only the government entities and research institutions and academia, but even the private industry, defense startups, etc. They will also get a platform to work together with their US counterparts in these critical areas to diversify the global supply chains, especially in key industries like pharmaceuticals or renewable energy, for example, and get hold of critical strategic minerals and to make these supply chains resilient, to reduce their dependency on China-controlled supply chains. So this will enormously benefit the defense industry as well. So these were the big takeaways from the India-US partnership, which was taken forward during Prime Minister Modi's visit. But however, there are concerns as well. Things are not as smooth and as easy as you think. There are some challenges present in this defense relationship. There has been no word about the GE fighter jet engines, the F404 and F414 engines, which were supposed to be delivered to India, which is critical for the light combat Tejas fighter jet built by HAL and NAL. See, the Indian Air Force is desperately looking to shore up its fighter jet fleet. The sanctioned strength, the squadron strength is around 42, but the current squadron strength has fallen, depleted to alarming levels. IAF is barely operating around 30 squadrons right now, and some of the older MiGs will be retired, especially the MiG-21s, some of the MiG-27s, MiG-29s. They will be retired very soon because they're already outdated. and the operational squadron strength of Indian Air Force might drop below 30, which is very alarming, because in that case, Indian Air Force will not be able to deal with the twin threat from Pakistan and China. We desperately need to shore up our fighter jet numbers, increase the squadron strength. That's why India is looking for many options. So LCA Tejas plays a critical role in this plan, as LCA Tejas, despite all its problems and challenges, will still help Indian Air Force shore up the number of fighter jets and increase the squadron strength. But the developers of Tejas, HAL, ADA, NAL, they've struggled with the Kaveri indigenous jet engine, which has been a failed project. The Kaveri jet engine project has failed. So now we were looking to commercially procure jet engines from US, from General Electric, the F404, F414 engines. And the contract for this was signed when PM Modi visited US last year and met with Joe Biden. But this time the US has been silent on this. It has not given any further commitment. It appears there is a delay in executing this contract. If the US holds on to this supply, if it doesn't supply these engines, LCA Tejas will not become a reality. Large numbers of LCA Tejas cannot be inducted into the Indian Air Force, which directly threatens the squadron strength of the Indian Air Force. Apart from this, the other question which has come up is whether India should buy the F-35, which the US has been offering to India. India is looking for an advanced 5th generation fighter jet as well. And this has thrown open a new competition between the American F-35 and the Russian Sukhoi 57, which we saw recently during the Aero India show in Bengaluru, where both the fighter jets faced off against each other, displaying their tremendous capabilities. While both are advanced 5th generation fighter jets, experts believe that Sukhoi 57 is more suited for the interests of Indian Air Force, because we have a history of operating Soviet and Russian equipment and Russian fighter jets. For example, not only the MiG series, but look at the Sukhoi 30 MKIs, which has been the backbone of Indian Air Force. Russia has even transferred the technology. We have indigenously produced the Sukhois, and HAL has the required infrastructure, maintenance, repair and overhaul facilities to handle and manage Russian fighter jets and Russian equipment. We are familiar with that. Indian Air Force is also more comfortable with Russian hardware. So the F-35 will not only be costlier, there are questions about its performance as well. Serious questions have been raised about its overall performance compared to the Sukhoi 57. And it's unlikely that US will provide transfer of technology. Russia is more willing to provide transfer of technology, where India can indigenously, domestically produce the fighter jets later and even use the existing infrastructure and MRO facilities, because the same facilities which are serving Sukhoi 30 jets can tomorrow serve Sukhoi 57 as well, which means we will save precious defense budget, we will save our resources, and it will be better suited for the Indian Air Force. But the F-35 will not only be costlier, there may not be a transfer of technology, and there are questions over its credibility and performance. But the Trump administration might push India to buy few F-35s. That is the dilemma that India might face. See, per unit cost of F-35 is $80 million. Now you might say this is much cheaper relatively compared to the Rafales that we bought from France. If you're aware, India was looking for a medium multi-role combat aircraft, where we had pushed a global competition. Many European vendors, American, Russian vendors were competing. Eventually the Rafales were chosen. But the French were also not willing to provide transfer of technology. Indian Air Force was looking for around 114 aircraft. But since the French were not willing to give transfer of technology because they didn't have faith in HAL, they didn't believe HAL could reproduce the Rafales in India, eventually a government-to-government deal was signed, and we procured just 35 Rafales in a flyaway condition, which were entirely built in France. We simply bought them and brought them to India. The Rafales that we bought were very expensive, almost costing $244 million per jet, 3 times the per unit cost of F-35. But don't forget, the Rafale came with a complete package. We paid $244 million per Rafale, not only for the fighter jet, but for critical missiles and the weapons package that came along with it. It included advanced missiles like the Scalp missile, the Meteor, which was very essential for the Indian Air Force. So the French provided an advanced weapons package. The French defense manufacturer Dassault Aviation, they not only gave the fighter jet to India, but with an advanced weapons package including latest missiles. US has not given any such promise or commitment. It's charging $80 million just for each jet, with no transfer of technology, with no prior experience in operating American fighter jets, which means our infrastructure cost, MRO cost will also increase, and Indian Air Force may not be compatible with operating American fighter jets. So this remains a point of concern because the Trump administration is apparently pushing India to buy few F-35s. If India makes that decision by compulsion, it could adversely affect the interests of the Indian Air Force, and it could even derail India-US defense relations to an extent. Like this, there are many other challenges. For example, American sanctions on Iran, then how the Ukraine war will come to an end, whether US-Russia relations will become normalized. This will also determine the future trajectory of India-US defense relations. So these are the points that the writers of this column are bringing up. I feel it's a very interesting topic that they have discussed, and this could be very, very important for your mains exam, even for your prelims as well. Now, let's look at the next article. We have an article related to the Election Commission of India and the selection and appointment of the Chief Election Commissioner and election commissioners. See, we have discussed this topic many times in the past, so I'll not waste your time. I'll just give you the basic gist of what this article says. I feel this article is still relevant and important because it's written by an eminent personality, PDT Acharya, a former Secretary General of the Lok Sabha. He brings his tremendous insight and expertise into this article, helps us understand the appointment process of the election commissioners and the Chief Election Commissioner. See, before 2023, we have studied in previous sessions that when it came to the appointment of election commissioners and Chief Election Commissioner to the Election Commission of India, the government of India had complete monopoly on the appointment process. Essentially, the Prime Minister, who chairs the Council of Ministers, would recommend the names to the President of India, and the President would provide for these appointments because President of India is bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. Essentially, the government, that is the Prime Minister, had a complete monopoly on the appointment of Election Commissioner and Chief Election Commissioners. Now, this has always been a matter of controversy because Election Commission of India is responsible for the conduct of elections in the country under the provisions of Article 324. It's one of the most critical constitutional bodies. It's a high constitutional office responsible for holding elections to the Lok Sabha, the state legislative assemblies, the parliament and the state legislative assemblies, and even to the office of the President and Vice President of India. Such a critical constitutional body is expected to be completely neutral, unbiased. It is expected to hold free and fair elections without showing any bias towards any party or any leader. It's supposed to display its integrity, its honesty in the public domain to ensure that the electorate has faith in the electoral process. That is the critical function performed by this constitutional body, this high constitutional office. The entire responsibility of maintaining free and fair conduct of elections lies with the Election Commission. Obviously, the appointment of the election commissioners and the CEC should also be a transparent process. But that was not the case before 2023. Before 2023, the government had full control over this, and obviously, election commissioners and CEC who would be appointed by the President, they would come on the recommendation of the PM, in a way making them subservient to the ruling party, leading to questions about the integrity of the Election Commission and its neutrality, and also the functioning of the Election Commission in certain controversial matters during times of election. Also brought up and strengthened these allegations that election commissioners often favor the ruling party at the center while targeting opposition parties. Even these allegations were enough to tarnish the image of the Election Commission and raise questions about its integrity as well. So in 2023, the Supreme Court intervened and provided for a selection process. It provided for a high-powered selection committee, a 3-member high-powered selection committee headed by the Prime Minister of India as the chairperson, with the leader of opposition from the Lok Sabha as a member and the Chief Justice of India. Judiciary gave itself a role in the selection and appointment process. But however, the Supreme Court also mandated the Parliament to bring out a law in this regard, to come out with an act to provide for a selection committee, and until then the Chief Justice of India would be a member of the selection committee. So this committee was seen as more fair and balanced, as it did not give unfair majority to the ruling party or the government. It had a representative from the government, the Prime Minister himself or herself, representation from the opposition by including the leader of opposition in Lok Sabha, and representation for the judiciary, which is independent judiciary in our country. But this was not liked by the government. The government saw this as judicial interference in the executive and the legislative's domain. Immediately, the Parliament enacted a law. The Chief Election Commissioner and Election Commissioner's Appointment and Term of Office and Conditions of Service Act was brought out in 2023, which negated this selection committee. Now it has been replaced with a new committee with a new composition. The new selection committee includes the Prime Minister as the chairperson, leader of opposition from the Lok Sabha to give space for opposition view as well. But the third member, the Chief Justice of India, has now been replaced by a cabinet minister who will be appointed by the Prime Minister. So recently when the CEC was chosen, the Prime Minister had appointed Union Home Minister Amit Shah as the cabinet minister. So clearly, as you can see, government holds majority in this new committee. That is where questions have been raised about the fairness, the transparency, and even the constitutionality of this entire process. That's why this law has been challenged on constitutional grounds. In fact, this law also provides for a search committee. It provides for a search committee to come out with 5 names to be considered for the roles of election commissioners and chief election commissioner. This search committee is headed by the Union Minister for Law and Justice with 2 senior government officials, essentially bureaucrats. So clearly the search committee is government dominated, headed by the Minister of Law and Justice with 2 government officials, 2 senior government bureaucrats. They come out with a name list of a list of 5 names. They shortlist these 5 names based on the eligibility and merit of the candidates, but it's not a transparent process. It's very opaque. Government is not clear as to what is the process being followed while shortlisting these 5 names. And also look at the selection committee. Government itself has majority because no cabinet minister will dare to go against the PM. Right? Be it Amit Shah or any other cabinet minister appointed by the PM, nobody would dare to go against the PM, clearly giving majority to the government itself. Essentially, the election commissioner and the chief election commissioner would be a government candidate. They might be honest and they might have highest integrity, but in the eyes of the public, it appears that government has appointed whom they wanted into these key constitutional positions. The leader of opposition simply has a nominal voice, a minority voice. Now, this is where constitutional questions are raised. In fact, this law has been challenged in the court, and the writer believes that this law can be struck down on constitutional grounds. The writer points out that if you look at the selection committee here, the chairperson, who is the PM, is the appointing authority for the cabinet minister. Correct? Which means the cabinet minister appointed by the PM will be subservient to the orders of the PM. As I said, no cabinet minister will dare go against the PM. But you might argue that there might be some cabinet ministers who might stand up, who might express their own view. But think about this. The PM is the appointing authority. Think about this from a constitutional legal perspective. The appointing authority is the PM, right? Obviously, the cabinet minister appointed into this committee is expected to be subservient to the PM. This is where the question comes up, whether the committee can be truly neutral, unbiased. Won't it favor the government, the ruling party, as the opposition has a minority voice? There is no scope for any independent representation. And look at the search committee. It's entirely dominated by the government, and the names which are shortlisted is following a very opaque process. So this could also be challenged on the grounds that it violates Article 14, that it violates right to equality of other meritorious candidates who might also be eligible. If the government is not transparent and clear as to what is the basis, the eligibility on which the candidates are being shortlisted, that is a violation of right to equality under Article 14. So on these grounds, according to the writer, the law can be struck down by the courts as unconstitutional. So that is what the writer feels. But let's see what the Supreme Court decides on this sensitive matter. Now coming to the next article, we actually have 3 different articles in the newspaper related to what's happening between US, Ukraine and Russia. So I just want to give you an oversight into these new developments that are taking place with regard to the Ukraine war. We have an editorial, we have an interview that the Hindu carries out with experts, including Kanwal Sibal, a former Foreign Secretary of India. They provide their deep insights into what's happening in Ukraine, what is the future for Ukraine, and what's happening between US and Russia. Then we also have an article on the front page itself, where we have received a statement from the Kremlin, from Russia, that Russia is not going to cede or give up any of the annexed territories in Ukraine. And then we have Donald Trump pushing for a peace plan without including Ukraine in it, while parallelly negotiating a minerals deal. So this raises the prospect whether US is trying to profit from this war. Is the American political, military, industrial complex benefiting from the war? Is this a new colonial agenda that we are seeing? That's the question being raised by this article. The Russia-Ukraine war has been raging for 3 years. According to reports, 1 million lives have been lost. There has been absolute destruction in eastern parts of Ukraine in particular, with Ukraine losing close to 8 lakh people, which include civilians and soldiers. Russia reportedly has lost around 2 lakh citizens, including civilians and soldiers. The death count is at a staggering 1 million, with Russia alleged to have committed large-scale human rights violations, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Russia stands accused of committing war crimes and crimes against humanity, which are very gross violations of human rights. And don't forget, Russia is in breach of the UN Charter. As it invaded Ukraine in 2022, it violated the sovereignty of the country and breached the territorial integrity of a neighboring nation. And thus Russia is in breach of UN principles enshrined under the UN Charter. Clearly, Russia was the aggressor state, irrespective of what the reason was. Now, it appears that the US is willing to bend over backwards, to ignore all these allegations, give Russia a free pass in order to strike a deal to bring this war to an end. See, if you have been following my classes, I've always told you since 3 years that this war in Ukraine is actually not a war between Russia and Ukraine. Why and how is it possible? How can Ukraine war not be about Ukraine? Trust me guys, this war is never about Ukraine. It was never about Ukraine. This is a proxy war between the West and Russia. A proxy war led by NATO, representing the Western countries, Europe and US, against Russia. Ukraine was a pawn which has been used and played around by both the sides. The reason why Russia went to war in Ukraine, as you all understand by now, was the instigation that Western countries carried out in Ukraine by pushing Ukraine to join NATO and European Union. The persistent expansion, eastward expansion of NATO and European Union is what triggered Russia to get aggressive against Ukraine. In fact, this war didn't begin in 2022. It's been going on since 1991 as a covert proxy war. It became an overt conflict from 2014. In 2014, Ukraine saw a major revolution, the Maidan revolution, the colored orange revolution, where a pro-Russian government was thrown out, allegedly with Western intelligence support, and a pro-Western government was installed. Russia retaliated by annexing Crimea. Russia retaliated by sponsoring pro-Russian separatists in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbas region. And finally, in 2022, it invaded the country. So what you have seen in Ukraine is not exactly a war between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine is at the center of it, yes, but the war was never about Ukraine. It was a much larger geopolitical conflict as a continuation of the Cold War rivalries that carried on between the Western powers led by US and European powers through NATO and European Union and Russia on the other side. So I've always insisted in each and every class that if this war has to end, it can end only when US and Russia talk to each other. Only if US and Russia can negotiate with each other. That is what you're seeing right now. So US and Russia are talking to each other, which is very much needed, very much necessary to tone down the tensions between them, because the US retaliated with sanctions against Russia. It has boycotted Russia at global platforms, got Russia removed from the G8 in 2014 when it annexed Crimea. So the rivalries will end, the war will end only if US-Russia tensions go down. In that regard, Donald Trump has made the right move by directly speaking to Putin, trying to engage with the Kremlin and working out a peace deal which can bring this brutal war to an end. In fact, Trump becomes the only American president to have officially, publicly acknowledged that NATO is at fault. US has openly acknowledged, President Trump has said the war started because of the Western powers, because of NATO, because of NATO's interference in Ukraine. Now this is a big win for Russia, a big win for the Kremlin, for Putin, and it substantially weakens European powers and European security. But Donald Trump, don't think, is trying to look at the humanitarian angle in this war. Don't think US is genuinely interested in peace, because there is a hidden nefarious agenda which has come to the forefront. See, Trump had made it his top priority, one of his top electoral promises during the presidential campaign was that he would end the war, because American taxpayers' money was being drained into Ukraine. Since US became the largest military supporter, providing financial aid and weapons, Trump has alleged that the US has given $350 billion worth of military and financial aid to Ukraine. He built his campaign based on this, that what are Americans getting in this faraway foreign war? Why are American taxpayers being penalized? And why US is paying $350 billion to Ukraine with nothing in return? Though Ukraine disputes these claims, it disputes the numbers. Yes, Ukraine has been able to sustain the war only because of American and European support. But Ukraine disputes these numbers. So Trump's argument has been that if elected to power, he would end the war and he would secure American interests and bring back that money in different forms. And that's what US is doing right now. Trump has reached out to Putin, neglected Zelensky, even called Zelensky a dictator, blamed the entire war on Zelensky and NATO. And now Trump is basically blackmailing, arm twisting Ukraine for a mineral deal, which we studied yesterday as well. The US-Ukraine critical minerals deal is being projected as a trade-off. Ukraine is blessed with rare earth elements and critical minerals, particularly in eastern Ukraine. Reports indicate Ukraine has $10 trillion worth of rare earth minerals, which is crucial for key industries, defense and strategic industries, and even renewable energy industries. So the US is fast-tracking the deal, and Zelensky has eventually fallen under pressure. Obviously, Ukraine wants a favorable treatment from the US. Without American support, Ukraine might even lose the territory that Russia has occupied. Don't forget, Russia is in annexation of 5 important Ukrainian territories. Ukraine might lose this. Close to 35-40% of Ukraine's territory might be gone. In fact, some of it is already under Russian control. Rest of it also might fall into Russia, and Ukraine will end up the loser, along with Europe emerging as a loser, because Europe wants the war to continue. European powers, they want Ukraine to get the support, financial military support, so it can stand up to Russia and Russia to be held accountable. But Trump says European security is European responsibility. Trump's argument is, why should NATO fund European wars? Why should US taxpayer money be used for European security? And based on this argument, Trump is now trying to bring back the so-called 350 billion or 500 billion, whatever the claim is, through this mineral deal, which gives a color, right, a very questionable color to the peace process itself. Now, if you follow the negotiations going on, right, it doesn't appear like a peace deal or a ceasefire agreement. It doesn't appear as if a war is ending, a brutal war with humanitarian consequences is about to end. It looks like a economic deal. It looks like a economic arrangement. Just because US gave military funds and weapons, now it's expecting a critical minerals deal with Ukraine, and Ukraine is succumbing under the pressure, and the deal clearly looks like a neo-colonial agenda. That's what colonial powers did. They looted colonies of their wealth and resources through unnecessary wars that were fought in their name. And that's similarly what that's exactly what US is appearing to do. And Russia has even reached out to US, pointing out that they can collaborate in exploring and exploiting the critical minerals of Ukraine. Why? Because Russia knows that it controls the key regions in eastern Ukraine where the deposits are found. You might even see a collaboration between Russia and US, where they will work together to harvest the rare earth minerals of Ukraine. So without consideration for the future of Ukraine, reconstruction of Ukraine, and the human rights of the people of Ukraine, it appears that US and Russia are just focusing on the economic and strategic interests, which is quite concerning. Now, where does Zelensky stand? Where does Ukraine stand in all of this? As I said, Ukraine has no leverage. It has no bargaining power. It has to accept what is given to it. Russia has made it clear that it is not going to give up any of the occupied territory. That's where the first article becomes important. Kremlin has publicly announced that it's not going to give up any of the annexed territory in the coming up peace process or the ceasefire deal. The war continues as of now. Even if a ceasefire is worked out, Russia is not going to give up any of the occupied territory. So which are the territories Russia has annexed? Please concentrate here. Russia has entirely captured the Donbas region in eastern Ukraine, which includes Donetsk and Luhansk. This is where Russia had sponsored the pro-Russian separatists since 2014. Russia has fully annexed these regions. It even held a so-called referendum, which is not recognized internationally. And now Russia says these areas are integrated into Russia. Similarly, Crimea, the Crimean Peninsula, was annexed in 2014. Here as well, Russia held a so-called referendum, which is not internationally recognized, and Russia has taken over Crimea. Then in other two critical regions, Zaporozhye, where the Zaporozhye nuclear plant is located, and Kherson region, Russia has some limited control. Though it doesn't fully control these regions, it has large control over here, and Russia has said it's not going to give up any of these 5 provinces. Be it Crimea, Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donetsk, Luhansk, most likely they will become Russian territory. Mark my words, the peace deal which will be worked out very soon, it might happen in few weeks, will give away these territories to Russia, and for the first time probably there would be a formal recognition of annexation of territory by an aggressive state. Now that will set a wrong precedent. Tomorrow other aggressive powers would do the same. Occupy territories from other countries, go to war, break principles of the UN Charter, and tomorrow expect the annexation to be recognized. Ukraine is proposing an exchange of territory, which is never going to happen. Because see, Ukraine also has captured a Russian territory called the Kursk region. That's located over here. Approximately over here, the large Kursk province of Russia has been captured by Ukraine. It was a daring military move by Ukraine last year where it captured the Kursk region. Ukraine is proposing an exchange of the territory, but Russia will never agree to it. Russia has the upper hand. As I said, Russia has captured 5 regions to Ukraine's 1 region. And more importantly, Russia has the support of Trump and the United States. Russia, US are directly negotiating an end to the war, which means Russia has all the leverage and the upper hand, and Ukraine has no bargaining power. So experts believe that Ukraine should accept what is being offered to it. Because right now the priority should be to end the war. That's what India has always spoken about. Even China has always spoken about the same, that the time has come to end this war. Ukraine will lose out, but unfortunately, realist approach dictates that Ukraine should accept what Trump is offering. That is the best solution or situation for Ukraine right now. In fact, Russia and Trump are even questioning the legitimacy of Zelensky in power. They are stating that Ukrainians don't support Zelensky, that Zelensky should step down. And Zelensky has said he will step down if it means bringing the war to an end, but on Ukrainian terms. The question is, will all the territory captured by Russia be given away? Will US and Russia exploit the advantage they have to corner the resources, the rare earth minerals, which is going to benefit their military industrial complex? It will bring tremendous economic benefit to US and Russia if this were to happen. And don't forget, this will serve Trump's political agenda. That's what he had promised to the domestic audience, that he will end the war and he'll bring back American taxpayers' money. Now it seems he's delivering on that commitment, right, which impresses the domestic voters. But the problem is, such domestic considerations driving foreign policy negotiations is quite dangerous, because as you can see, those who are on the wrong side, they might basically get recognition, they might get even support. Their actions, illegitimate actions, might get legitimate recognition, which is honestly a complete derailment of the rules-based order. But this might benefit India. India might stand to benefit immensely from this, thanks to our position on this conflict. Thanks to India's principle of strategic autonomy and independent foreign policy and policy of multi-alignment. We never condemned Russia for the war. We even ignored the Western sanctions, bypassed the sanctions, and helped Russia in this war by becoming the biggest buyer of Russian oil and gas. We empathized with Ukraine, gave some support and sympathy for Ukraine, while calling for an end to the war and balancing the ties with the US. So if US-Russia ties become normal, then India is the country which stands to benefit from this. This is the unfortunate reality of geopolitics. You do benefit from some others' sufferings. That's how it works. So it does serve the interest for India, but let's wait and watch what will happen. Most likely Russia will keep all these occupied territories, Ukraine will lose out, and US will get control of all the critical mineral wealth and resources. In fact, according to the proposed deal, which has been published by newspapers, it appears that US is setting up a reconstruction fund for Ukraine. A new fund is being set up, which will be administered by US and Ukraine is mandated to deposit 50% of the funds that it generates from its natural resources into this reconstruction fund. Whatever natural resources Ukraine has, be it minerals, including critical rare earth minerals and hydrocarbon reserves, agricultural exports, everything. Whatever revenue it generates, 50% of it has to go into this fund, and the rest will be mobilized, maybe from Western countries. Right? We need more clarity on that. And this reconstruction fund will assist in the reconstruction of Ukraine, to rebuild the damaged infrastructure, to rebuild its economy. But look at the responsibility being placed on Ukraine. Though it was at the receiving end, Ukraine was the victim. Look at how Ukraine is losing out. It's not only losing its territory, it's losing control over its resources, its economy, its economic sovereignty will be under American control. Its resources and land might come under Russian control. So Ukraine either ways stands to lose out. So as experts suggest, the only practical way forward is to end the war, though it affects Ukraine and it goes against the principles of fairness. Right? There's nothing fair in geopolitics. Now, coming to the prelims section, let's take a quick look at the small articles in today's newspaper, and then we can wrap up the session for today. On the front page, there's a small article referring to the Public Accounts Committee, which I feel is very important for prelims. The article is not relevant, but it mentions the Public Accounts Committee. So what is the Public Accounts Committee? It's one of the most important, most powerful parliamentary committees set up in 1921. It is very important to maintain financial accountability on the executive. The PAC, as it is called, it has the authority to examine CAG reports. The audit report submitted by the Comptroller Auditor General, which is tabled in the Parliament, is examined by the Public Accounts Committee. The PAC can examine government spending and government expenditure and hold the government accountable on the appropriateness and the efficiency of government spending. So this is a tremendous power vested with this parliamentary committee, which makes PAC one of the most powerful, most important parliamentary committees. The composition of this committee is very important. It consists of 22 members, 15 of them elected from Lok Sabha, 7 from the Rajya Sabha. They are elected amongst the MPs using the principle of proportional representation by means of a single transferable vote. They have a term of 1 year, and the Speaker of the Lok Sabha gets to appoint the chairperson of the committee. And since 1967-68, the convention has been that Speaker always appoints an opposition leader from an opposition party as the chairperson to ensure transparency and fairness in this committee. Because if a member of a ruling party is appointed, that creates a conflict of interest. In fact, on the same ground, a minister cannot be part of the pack. Someone who's part of the Council of Ministers, right, a union minister cannot be part of the Public Accounts Committee because that is a direct conflict of interest. Similarly, the chairperson generally always comes from the opposition party, not from the ruling party. This is not a rule, it's not a mandate, but it's a convention followed since 1967-68. These are the key facts you need to remember with regard to Public Accounts Committee. Next, there's an article on page 4 that refers to a notorious group in Manipur which has been involved in the violence and the clashes, known as Arambai Tenggol. The Arambai Tenggol, which calls itself a volunteer group, it has surrendered its arms and weapons. The Arambai Tenggol was set up by a Methi leader who is the titular king, the descendant of the Methi kingdom, the Manipuri kingdom, who is also a Rajya Sabha member, by the way. The stated goal of this organization is, it's like a voluntary organization. It's essentially a revivalist organization. It seeks to protect the interests of the majority Methis, and it wants to revive the indigenous faith of the Methi kingdom, the Sana Mahi faith. This was before the Methis adopted Hinduism. So this is the goal of this organization, Arambai Tenggol. It calls itself a volunteer group, a civil society organization, a revivalist organization to protect Methi interests and to revive the indigenous faith of the Methis. But however, its actions of late have been very controversial, with experts calling this organization an armed militia. Members of this group have armed themselves in the conflict between Methis and the Kuki-Zo militant groups and armed groups. So Arambai Tenggol members have been involved in large-scale violence, and finally they have surrendered their arms and weapons. So that is the big development here, because the governor of Manipur, Ajay Balla, the newly appointed governor, has negotiated with this outfit, this so-called radical revivalist militia outfit, and made some promises. According to reports, the government is willing to consider the demands of the Methis, which includes a national register for citizens with 1951 as the cutoff year, with strict action against drug and poppy cultivation, which Methis have alleged that Kuki-Zo community members have been involved in, and a promise that the border security would be strengthened with fencing of India-Myanmar border, which has been a long-standing demand of the Methis. So some of these demands apparently will be fulfilled by the government. That's what the governor allegedly has promised. So in return, this radical volunteer group has surrendered its arms. So you should know what is Arambai Tenggol. Next, on page 10, we have an article that makes a reference to the Hague Service Convention, which has been in the news. Let's quickly understand why is it in news. What is the Hague Service Convention? I think it's very important for your prelims. See, recently, members of Adani Group, including its founder Gautam Adani, have been indicted in the US on corruption and bribery charges, and legal proceedings are being pressed against Adani and officials of Adani Group in the US. Right? The Security Exchange Commission is seeking the prosecution of Gautam Adani and some senior officials of Adani Group for alleged corrupt activities and bribing Indian government officials for winning lucrative energy projects. So while India has distanced itself from this controversy, US has officially reached out to India. The SEC, which is a regulator of the markets in the US, has officially sent out a request to the Ministry of Law and Justice to issue a legal order to Adani and members of Adani Group who are being indicted, and to summon them and issue the orders to them by using the provisions of this convention called Hague Service Convention. So what is this Hague Service Convention? It was worked out in the year 1965 to promote cooperation between countries in civil judicial matters. Let's say in a civil case in one country, the correspondents in the case, let's say they are foreigners residing in a foreign country. So the court in another country will have to send them summons and notices and other legal judicial documents. Now sending those documents into a foreign country and serving those notices and documents will become difficult because the other country, the other judiciary will not have jurisdiction. That is why a global mechanism was created through this convention, the Hague Service Convention. It built upon the previous multilateral treaties that existed in 1905 and 1954. Hague Conventions on Civil Procedure had been worked out to facilitate cooperation between countries in civil matters where judicial notices and documents can be served. So built upon this is the 1965 Hague Service Convention, through which the signatories to the convention agree to help each other in serving judicial notices, requests and issuing orders and summons to the correspondents in a particular case. So India, US, both of them are signatories to this convention. There are 84 countries which are signatories to the Hague Service Convention, and it's an obligation on the countries to help each other in serving these notices and orders. They should appoint a nodal authority. In India, nodal authority is Ministry of Law and Justice. The Ministry of Law and Justice in India is the nodal authority designated by the Government of India. So according to the provisions, the Security and Exchange Commission of the US is the nodal authority in the US jurisdiction. So it has reached out to the nodal authority in India, the Ministry of Law and Justice, to get this notice and summon issued to Adani and members of Adani Group who are being indicted on corruption charges. Is that clear? The signatory states will decide on how these notices and requests will be communicated, what will be the mode of communication. Primary mode of communication will be through the designated nodal authority, or it could even be done through diplomatic channels or direct communication between judicial officers, or even through postal service and consular channels. So different routes and options are available, but India, US have both agreed to communicate with each other through their nodal authorities, that is the Ministry of Law and Justice in India and Securities and Exchange Commission in the US. Now the question is, will India serve these notices to Adani? Now that US has used the Hague Service Convention to push India to issue the summons and notice, will India abide by the commitment? Do we have a escape route? Experts point out that under provisions of Article 13 of this convention, India can cite national security or sovereignty risk and not follow the request of the US. India will reserve the right to not serve these notices to Adani by citing that it could be a sovereignty risk or a national security risk. But this could strain India-US relations as well. So let's see how things will develop, but please note down these key provisions of the Hague Service Convention. Next, olive Ridley turtles which have been in the news. The Aribada season, the mass nesting phenomena, has just been witnessed on the coastline of Odisha at the hatcheries and the rookeries that are present at Rushikulia, or the mouth of the Rushikulia river which drains into Bay of Bengal, and the Gahirmata sanctuary. This is the hot spot of the olive ridleys where the mass nesting phenomena is witnessed at these nesting grounds. So this phenomena of mass nesting by olive ridleys is called Aribada, and it's an endangered species, as in a threatened species listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List. It's a threatened marine species, a sea turtle listed as vulnerable, a threatened species listed as vulnerable on the IUCN Red List. Now, according to this article, though lakhs of new turtles hatched during the recent Aribada season, the concern is that the sex ratio has skewed in favor of female turtles because of higher temperature. Researchers are pointing fingers at climate change and global warming. Because of global warming, the temperature of the sand where the eggs are laid by the turtles has gone up significantly, and researchers believe that there might be a link between the increased sand temperature and the more number of female turtles which are hatching. So this is skewing the sex ratio. So researchers are worried, activists are worried that will it affect the turtle population in the future, in the long run. Now these olive ridleys can be found around the world. Now can you find out the mass nesting grounds of olive ridleys around the world? Mention that in the comments. In India, I have told you the major mass nesting site is in Odisha at Rushikulya Gahirmata. Similarly, find out other major locations. I'll give you a clue. Usually, olive ridley mass nesting sites are located in tropical waters, right? In the tropical belt, along some of the beaches in the tropical belt, that's where you find the mass nesting grounds. So please find out in which other countries, which other regions can you find this phenomena. Next, on page 15, we have a small article regarding India's hunt for critical minerals. Right? Critical minerals have become very crucial as it is needed for batteries, for renewable energy sector, defense, space, aerospace, and many other key industries. So we are hunting and scouting for more critical mineral resources. And in this article, the government has informed that countries like Congo, that is the DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, then Zambia, Tanzania, and Australia, these are the focus countries to secure few mines for accessing critical strategic minerals and rare earth minerals. Understood? India has set up a dedicated organization called Kabil, Khanij Bidesh India Limited, to scout for such resources and secure these mines. In fact, in the lithium triangle in South America, where you have the ABC countries, Argentina, Bolivia, Chile. With ABC countries, Kabil is closely working with them to scout for these critical strategic minerals. And with Argentina, we've already signed a deal. We've already signed a contract where Kabil has gained access to a mine of one critical mineral. Can you find out which is this mine in Argentina? Can you mention that in the comment section? That is a small homework for you. So apart from Argentina, Bolivia, Chile, the other focus countries are Australia. Kabil has signed a deal with Australia as well. And we are scouting for resources in Africa, especially in Tanzania, in Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia, which are blessed with critical strategic minerals. Then to improve port efficiency and to streamline port operations in the country, which will help in improving logistics, the government has announced the One Nation, One Port process. One Nation, One Port process has been launched by the Ministry of Ports. This will bring a set of standard procedures, standard operating procedures and guidelines to streamline port operations. How goods will be loaded and deloaded, how container operations will be carried out, how efficiently they'll be managed, what will be the turnaround time at our port terminals. That will determine the efficiency of our logistics. So One Nation, One Port process has been launched by the government to streamline port operations and improve port efficiency. And to measure our logistics performance, government has launched a logistics port performance index, which has been named as Sagar Ankalan. Sagar Ankalan is the name of the logistics port performance index that has been launched to track the efficiency of our port operations and logistics management. Next, on page 16, another important update. Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have signed a border deal to end their decades-old border conflict. This border conflict dates back to 1991, the end of the Cold War, when USSR collapsed, because both these Central Asian republics were part of the Soviet Union. So after they broke apart from Soviet Union and became these independent Central Asian countries, Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan have a long-standing boundary dispute in the Batken region that you see over here. This right here is the Batken region, which is also shared with Uzbekistan. These three countries share this region called Batken region, which also includes the strategic and historical Fergana Valley. You might remember, Fergana Valley is closely linked with India. Babur came from Fergana Valley, and we have close Hindu, Islamic and Buddhist connections with Fergana Valley region. So over here, there is a long-standing dispute. In fact, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan have even fought wars and limited conflicts over this dispute over here. Finally, they have ended this long-standing dispute by signing this border deal, which allows Kyrgyzstan to gain 25 square kilometers of land. Tajikistan also gains some part of the land in exchange for water resources. They have agreed that some neutral roads will be created to allow for connectivity in the region, and both sides can access the resources present. They are creating some neutral zone along the disputed areas where both sides will have access to resources in the neutral roads, and both sides will get some piece of land which was in question. So this border deal ends the decades-long conflict between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan. Next, another article related to Japan's demography, which is very concerning. Japan's birth rate has fallen to a historic low. UPSC has already asked a prelims question last year regarding such demographic changes. So I think such insights are very important. Japan has recorded its lowest ever birth rate. Hardly 7,20,000 children were born last year in Japan. This is the lowest for the 9th consecutive year. And also, Japan is staring at an alarming demographic crisis. The number of deaths is double the number of births. If 7.2 lakh children were born last year, you can assume 14 to 15 lakh Japanese died last year. That is the number. So this mismatch, what does it lead to? It leads to depopulation. Japan already has an aging population, which is affecting its economic growth, creating a shrinking workforce. Right? Japan is not able to take care of its elderly, creating a social economic crisis. It doesn't have enough young people to work in key sectors. So aging population is already a burden on Japan. And now depopulation, which has been there from few years, is an added problem where the death rate has gone above the birth rate. Now the death rate is double the birth rate. And Japan has witnessed a historic low with regard to the number of births for the 9th consecutive year. Its peak population growth was in 1973 when it added 2.1 million births. Since then, Japan has been on the decline in the last 30-40 years. So this demographic crisis is a serious economic and social challenge for Japan. Coming to the last article, very small update. Amazon, AWS, Amazon Web Services, has launched its first ever quantum computing chip known as Ocelot. The other day, I told you about Microsoft's quantum computing chip. So please note down the names of these quantum computing chips as they mark major leaps in the field of quantum computing. You don't need all the technical details. Just for prelims, just know which company, which tech giant has developed which of these quantum computing chips. So that is it. With this, we bring today's discussion to an end. I hope it's been a useful session. And if you did benefit, do let me know in the comments. Don't forget to press the like button and do subscribe to our channel. So that is it. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.